What's up, guys? My name is Mike. Welcome to a very special episode of Let's Play Hearts of Iron 4, our Learn About Canada edition. So we're talking about Canadian heroes in the last couple episodes, and I'm going to tell the story of three of my most famous, favorite guys ever in World War II. I'm not a big Navy guy. I really preferred reading about ground battles, even above like air battles and whatever. Some people out there are really big like Navy people, really big boat people, and love you guys. It's just really not my thing. I prefer the ground battle stuff, but these guys are just so goddamn cool that they're worthwhile talking about. The Three Musketeers. So, like I kind of led off with in the last episode, these guys were three dudes from Vancouver. Legionary Rome is all fucked up. From Vancouver, lifelong boat people. And Canada had a great reputation when it came to their navy at World War II, despite having basically no ships. You have to understand, again, Canada at the time was a huge community of farmers and fishers and miners and so on. So a lot of people had a ton of boat experience. In fact, there was if you know the name Jack McClelland, he was a future publisher. He was actually a boat commander, like a Navy guy in World War II. When he was signing up, the British commander, first of all, asked him if he'd ever been, with how apt he was at being at sea, if he had been, on boats his entire life. And McClellan replied with, no, only since I was 5 years old. So this is kind of the legacy that some of these guys went back to, sort of the great history that they endured and, really embraced, being seamen. I love that word, being seamen. So these three brothers, why can't I fight this? Oh, because we didn't enter the war. Oh, we can't actually fight. We need to declare war on these guys. Damn it. That's right, I said not to declare war, so we need to, how long is this going to take? Should be fast, only 30 days. Okay, let's get our guys back. I screwed that one up, guys. Sorry, I should have just said yes. So we'll set a fallback line here, and then we'll, get ourselves in position to fight against the Soviets. So these three guys, three brothers in blood, guys by the name of Douglas Matland, who was the overall commander of the Canadian flotilla in the Mediterranean, Cornelius Burke and Tom Ladner, three brilliant guys. So first of all, you have to understand, again, these guys were lifelong boaters, lifelong on the sea, and they signed up immediately when World War II broke out. They cut their teeth running these small sort of Corvette-class gunships, like small little gunboats. They were meant to really escort convoys and guard against German E and U-boats. So they would have depth chargers, they would have small guns, but we're not talking about like cruisers. We're not talking about anything big. We're talking about just a handful of people in these small boats. They're really agile and perfect for Canada's role, Canada's economy at the time. So they're on these boats, and they're cutting their teeth in the English Channel, and they eventually get reassigned to the Mediterranean Sea, where they almost, along with a lot of other Canadian troops, they almost revolutionize sea combat single-handedly. Now, I shouldn't say single-handedly because it was a group effort, but here's a couple of tactics they used to use. So no joke. You're talking about like minefields, like seaborne minefields, right? Called arms. Okay, we'll just accept this is going to be faster. Yes, we'll accept. We're at war now, finally. Sorry about that, Britain. I should have just said yes when the time came. We're going to try to fight against this northern front. I figure we're good, hardy Canadians. We can probably fight in the north. So, naval minefields. Naval mines are funny because they're timed. They're not like regular landmines where if you step on them, they blow up. They have to be timed, so when the boat's going over them, it'll trigger. It's on a fuse, so the bomb won't go off when it hits the bow of the boat. You want it to go off as it hits the middle of the boat. So they have like a bit of a fuse to them. So what they discovered is these fuses were set for longer, sort of like destroyers and cruisers. So these little corvettes they were flying around in were perfect. So what they would do is they just blast over the corvette or over the minefields at full speed, and they'd be fast enough to outrun the explosion as they go over it. No shit. They'd actually purposely drive into the minefield at top speed in order to trick the mines to blow up behind them. So they'd clear out entire minefields in no time at all using these tactics. They would do things like speed up behind an enemy at full speed, and then they'd crawl down in the middle of the night, crawl down to nearly dead silent crawling, and then sneak up to less than 100 yards or so, and then, they'd sneak up on the enemy boats, and then they'd blast them full blast, unload everything they had at basically point-blank range. They also mastered a maneuver where they would zip out in front of the boat, in front of the bow, pull a 90 degrees. So they pull up beside it, like a bigger German flotilla, like the E-boats and so on, pull up beside it at full speed, pull a 90-degree turn right in front of it, and then drop depth charges. So the German boat wouldn't be able to turn in time because they were bigger and slower, and they would ride right over it and blow them up. So these guys were just killing it in the Mediterranean with these tactics, using these small, agile boats to the best of their advantage, and all, again, lifelong seamen, lifelong sea hounds. So, I mean, again, they also fit this mold, though, this weird Canadian stereotype, which is so different from today, being just hard-drinking, fun-loving type guys. So, for example, it was Cornelius Burke who just got married before the war broke out, and he snuck his wife, his new bride, onto his boat for a certain amount of time right as the war broke out, because he didn't want to be away from her. So he snuck her on board along with like a crate of scotch in the middle of the night. And of course, I'm sure the scotch, he broke into those supplies, and it gave him a little bit of liquid courage to pull off such a heist. But I mean, this is unheard of, to bring your wife onto the boat you're stationed on. A pretty terrible idea if you ask me, but this is what they would just do. There's also a story where they were drinking with a bunch of, other Allied forces in the Mediterranean. I think actually on Malta, after Malta was, secure. And all three of them are drinking with a bunch of soldiers from Scotland, a bunch of Scot Navy men. And I forget which one it was. I can't remember which one it was. I want to say Tom Ladner. So what he did is one of the Scots, who's in full military dress, which for Scotland includes the kilt and the whole bit, gets up on a table and is dancing a jig and kind of taunting the Canadians, saying, "I bet you can't do this." And you'll have to imagine that in a funny, great, thick Scottish accent, which I'm not even going to bother embarrassing myself by trying. And in reply, Tom Ladner says, "No, I can't." But what he does is he takes a glass of sherry, and eats it. He eats the glass and chews it, breaks up in his mouth and chews the top of the glass, and then he hands the stem of the glass. If you know what a sherry glass looks like, it's got like a long stem with a small sort of bowl on it. He hands the stem over to the Scottish soldier and says, "I say the best part for you," and expects him to eat it. Of course, a fight breaks out because everybody's drunk. He takes this as a great insult, and the military police have to break it up. But again, it just goes to the sort of the spirit of these Canadian troops that were like almost a frontier type spirit. We're getting just butchered on this Soviet line. This is not going well for us. Soviets are really strong over here. We need to get these fucking... Where are you, Americans? We need your help. I have 49 dudes over here. Come over and help us on the front lines. Again, kind of going back to this frontier spirit. A couple of the things these guys did is they were getting disgusted, especially their fearless leader, Douglas Maitland. He was getting disgusted at the German tactic of running troops in trains on land, up and down, disguised as hospital and supply trains. So they would do this to avoid Allied bombing, but of course, it's World War II is a little bit more, I want to say, chivalrous than modern warfare. So this was seen as like a slap in the face of what would be considered to be honorable warfare. So he was disgusted by this. So what he did is he took all three of these guys, they went, and they found a train track that was less than 500 yards from the shore, near Sicily actually. And with precise pinpoint shots, 500 meters away, half a kilometer away, their boats knocked this fucking train right off the tracks. They hit it with everything they had from the shore, from the water, over the shore, and knocked this boat right off the train tracks. Pardon me. They knocked the train right off the train tracks. So they realized this train was one of these disguised German ones, and they blew up all the Germans in the train and just completely collapsed it. Of course, they got in deep shit for that. And the commanders weren't too happy about them going off the reservation, so to speak, to wage their own little holy war. It was just, again, sort of the time and the hard drinking lifestyle of these guys. There's so many great stories about these guys. I mean, it's hard to kind of compress it all into one video. Those are just really the highlights. And they made it all the way through the war. All three guys survived, surprisingly, at a time where naval casualties were so high. It was amazing these guys were able to survive the entire war, and they all came home alive and well with a whole like reef of distinguished medals. Distinguishings? I don't even know how to say. What's the plural of being distinguished? I don't know. They came home with a whole reef of medals between them. So between them, they had 7 distinguished service medals. They had 4 mentioned dispatch honors, and they had one. I'm going to try to pronounce it. My French is horrible. Croix de guerre, cross of war, cross of battle, the battle war cross, whatever, however you want to say it. So highly, highly decorated. And, just a great example of how, with limited resources, limited manpower, and a lot of ingenuity, Canadian soldiers really brought forth all these new tactics that they were able to use to great effect. And tactics that were used even today, a lot of the stuff they were kind of coming up with is still used in part today with these smaller Corvette-class ships. And certainly were used heavily by the Allied soldiers back then. So, like I said, we started off this sort of chunk of this series talking about all the ground war disasters that Canada was going through. And then we kind of balanced it out with some of the huge successes we were having in air combat and sea combat. So I mentioned before how one of the great truisms of war is the wars of today are fought with the tactics of the wars of yesterday. And this became especially true when talking about one of the first big forays of Canada into ground combat into Italy. So some of the first great ground combat successes for Canada actually came in Italy, backing up the British and the U.S. troops. And this is in due part to both the brilliance and the complete disaster of Canada's sort of head military honcho, a dude by the name of Andrew McNaughton. So we'll get into his story and how he both brought Canada to the forefront, or at least allowed to bring Canada to the forefront, and also simultaneously kind of embarrassed Canada in sort of a dual-edged sword that, in the end of the day, actually turned out to be a great thing for history and a great thing for Canada as a whole. So we'll talk about that next episode. Going to take a break. Thanks so much, guys. Much love. Big kisses. We'll see you soon.